بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
So we are inshallah carrying on our discussions, and as we mentioned before, the topic for our series is called Legends Untold. These are stories of individuals who have lived in the past. It is a family program, so we're going to try to keep the stories, even if the stories happen to have some incidents that may not be kid appropriate, we'll try to communicate that in a way that it is appropriate and acceptable to everyone over here, inshallah. So if I was to tell you that there was a conflict or there was a battle that took place. What's a battle?
War.
Tell me.
War.
What do you mean a war?
Like,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah, so it's two sides fighting for a cause, fighting for a piece of land. They could be fighting for freedom. Somebody has taken over there, fighting for their freedom, right? They could also be fighting to take over other people's lands, right? Those are all forms of battles. So if I were to tell you that a particular battle took place, I'm not going to tell you the time frame, and here was the numbers on both sides. Battle number 1, the number of people were 100. And the number of people on side 2 were 23,000. What's the first number? 300. Side 1. Side 2, 23,000. Okay? And the people from side 1, so side 1, 300 people, actually ended up winning over side 2. And within 6 months after that, there was another battle. And side 1 had 3,000 people. Side 2 had roughly 40,000 people. 39 something. 40,000. And side 1 ended up winning again. When do you think this type of a battle took place? Side 1 being Muslims, side 2 being people who were not Muslims. What time do you think a battle of such nature would have taken place? Give me a time frame, yeah? Is that a wild guess, or like are you just like randomly guessing? Why 1969? Okay. No. 2058. It's a battle from the future. That's amazing. Love it. It's a battle that is taking place in the future. We have future knowledge about it. This battle took place in 2058. MashaAllah. Amazing. Someone else. Maryam. No. You want to guess? Anybody else? When do you think a battle like that where Muslims were so powerful? Would it be 100 years? Last 200 years? Husna, last 200 years? Maybe? Okay, roughly around 300 years ago. So, what I was to tell you that the person who won the battle, he died in 1963. That's why I was really amazed that you said 1969. Okay, the person who led this battle, he actually died in 1963. We have records of his audio transcripts of him giving speeches. We have records of video footage on black and white, those cameras. And we have pictures of his. And these battles took place 21. Okay, right after World War I and before World War II. Okay, right after World War I. Now, what's really fascinating about this individual, as we get to know about him a little bit, inshallah, is that about this person, and if we do not know the time frame, many of us are going to think that this person lived centuries and centuries ago. Many of his kids are alive today. Let that sink in. Maryam al-Khattabi, she's still alive. His daughter. She's still alive today. Many of the people who participated in past battles are still alive today. They're around. There was one person in Morocco who was 16 at the time of the battle, and they have video footage of his interview where he interviewed and he told about this particular individual, right? So many times, talked about it in history, that, you know, that sometimes these amazing things happen right next to us, and we may not be aware of them. This particular person, his name is al-Karim al-Khattabi. Actually, Muhammad ibn al-Karim al-Khattabi. His name is Muhammad ibn al-Karim al-Khattabi. He was born in 1882. He was born in 1882 and he passed away in 1963. Born in Ajdir, Morocco, which is an area towards the present-day Morocco, and it's close to the sea. And yes, he died. Yes. And he died on 6th of February 1963 in Cairo. Now, many of you are not old enough to know this question. Those of you that might know this, let's see who can answer this, the older ones. Who is credited in the modern day history to have invented guerrilla warfare? So if you read modern day history, who do they say that, oh, this is the father of guerrilla warfare? Somebody who invented, you know what guerrilla warfare is, where you don't attack the army, you attack a portion and then you come back and come back and you go and you do these small attacks and you create chaos within a big army because your numbers are so small, so you can't attack them wholly. You can't go, full on. So only way you can do it is you attack them in sides, like tick, 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 tick. Some of the prominent people in warfare and succeeded against major nations in the world was Ho Chi Minh in Vietnam. He defeated the American army. Guerrilla warfare. Okay, their numbers were not big, a lot stronger power, and they used warfare to cause such chaos and fear that the soldiers would be walking in the middle of the jungle, and they were so afraid that anybody can attack them in a minute. Right? So did Mao, as well as Che Guevara. So Che Guevara, is that how you pronounce it? No, I'm pronouncing it wrong. Yes, I know, probably Che Guevara. So Che Guevara, he actually is credited to have invented guerrilla warfare. But what's really interesting is in his last trip to Morocco, to Egypt, when al-Karim al-Khattabi was in Egypt at that time, he actually went and he credited and he said that I actually learned how to defend my country through your inspiration. He actually met al-Karim al-Khattabi. And let's talk a little bit about him now. That's our topic for today. So al-Karim al-Khattabi, he was a young boy at that time, 1882. He was born in a small tribe, in a small town of Ajdir in Morocco. His dad, al-Karim, Muhammad was his name, Muhammad al-Khattabi. His dad, al-Karim al-Khattabi, was a judge in the city that he lived in. And they were from a particular tribe, a very known tribe near the coastal areas of Morocco, and they were called Wirgals or Urigals, and there's another name for them which is Warigar. So there's different pronunciations they have for them. So he was from that particular tribe, And he ended up going to one of the big universities of that time in Morocco, Jamia Qayraween, which is the oldest institute out there in Morocco. Then he actually went and he was fluent in Spanish and Arabic. And actually when he studied mine engineering. He was an engineer. He knew how to build mines and the engineering related to mining and stuff like that. He learned all of that, and then he came back after he finished. Now on his way back, because he was fluent in Arabic and he was fluent in Spanish, there is a Spanish enclave. So enclaves are basically these cities within a country which is run by a different country. So if you ever look up on the map of Emirates, United Arab Emirates, right in the middle of United Arab Emirates, in the middle of it, you're going to see a small portion that is controlled by Oman. A small portion that is controlled by the Sultanate of Oman, in the middle of the Emirates. So like the entire country. Similarly, right in the middle of Spain, right at the coast, is a small city called Melilla. So this city, because it's in an Arabic land, they spoke Arabic over there. So as he was coming back, they said, why don't you just become a Qadi, because you have studied Sharia, you're fluent in Spanish, and now you are also, you've studied engineering, so you understand the Spanish culture. We have a Spanish city over there, and we are running a whole bunch of things out of that city. Why don't you just work for us? So he started working for the Native Affairs Department back then. Now, soon he realized that when the war ended, towards the end of the war in 1915, he used to work for the Bureau of Native Affairs, and he realized that, by the way, he also taught Hispanic, he taught in the Hispanic Arabic schools. There were schools that were teaching Arabic to the Spanish people, and there were schools that were teaching Spanish to the Arabic people. So he actually taught in that school language too. Now, what's really interesting about him is that he is in the middle of all of this. He realizes that these people are the Spanish people. They have ill intentions. They're not going to leave our country. So he realizes quickly, Spain and France, they are here and they're going to take over our country. So he started putting up this fight, and he said, there's no way we're going to allow a foreign force, somebody from a different country, come and take over. Imagine if somebody comes and take over Canada, right? You wouldn't want that, right? So everybody is having their life and they're living in this beautiful country of Morocco. And then from nowhere, these Spanish people, they decided that they're not going to leave. So that's where al-Karim al-Khattabi, his actual thought process and his conflict with the Spanish authorities begin. He decides and he says, you know what, I am not going to do anything with the Spanish people, although I speak fluent Spanish. And he went back to his hometown at that time in Rif in Ajdir. And in January 1919, he was alarmed by the appearance of Spanish agents that came to the tribal territories and decided and invade their lands. At that moment, he said, you know what, I am going to defend. So the tribe got together, and in 1920, his father Abdul Karim, together with those brothers, the father Abdul Karim with Muhammad and his brother, they both decided that they're going to put up a fight. They're not going to let Spanish people take over their village, and they put up a fight, and they actually started defending themselves. Now, during the process of that defense, his father, Abdul Karim, he passed away in 1920. So in 1921, towards the fall of 1921, the Republican of Rif, so Abdul Karim al-Khattabi, with the effort and the insurgents of these people, the Spanish people trying to invade his village, he said, we cannot fight alone. We have to put together some form of a group that is collectively defending. So at that moment, he formed something which was called the Republic of Rif. Rif means the coral reef. You all know that. The areas that are close to the coastal areas. So into distance, what happened was it was an independent republic People started, the villages, the tribes, they started connecting and they started going in. And what's really interesting was the Spanish and the French people, they could not take this. So they took it on themselves and they said, we're going to dismantle the entire Morocco region. So when I say the entire Morocco region, you have to understand, I do not have a map, otherwise I would show you, but think of it all, if you ever look at a map from Libya all the way down to Mauritania, they colored the entire 2 colors, and France said, we're going to take the pink color, and they said, we're going to take or the green color. They divided the entire, so you're talking about Libya, you're talking about Tunisia, you're talking about half of Morocco, the other half of Morocco, Mauritania, all of these countries, perfectly Muslim free lands. And we're talking about 1920s, right after the World War. They said, oh, these guys are Berbers, they are illiterate people, we are a sophisticated society. In the name of democracy, we are going to go and invade these lands. They have no business being there. So they split up these countries, and the Spanish people, they being at odds with none other than al-Karim al-Khattabi. In 1921, what happens is that the efforts of al-Karim al-Khattabi, and he started building something which was called the guerrilla leadership, which means he started building these small, powerful battalions all throughout the entire Moroccan region. And the Spanish people, they were extremely scared about that. They were like, if their armies are going, they have no idea when they're going to be attacked. And it could be an attack of 10 people, or it could be an attack by 50 people, we don't know. So they were terrified about that. So at that point, what happened is Abdul-Karim sent the commander to the general at that time, which was Manuel Fernandez Silvestri. This person, he was known as a person who didn't care about lives. He just wanted to kill. And the warning that Abdul-Karim said is, there is a river. That river is the river of Amqaran, Nahar Amqaran. Do not cross the river of Nahar Amqaran, and if you do that, you would have declared an open war against me. So Muhammad ibn Abdul Karim, he sends this message to the Spanish. He doesn't care. He collects an army of 60,000 people, and he crosses the river. So how many people did he cross with? 60,000. Okay? And what happens is, in June 1921, Muhammad ibn Abdul Karim al-Khattabi, he says, we can't take this anymore. So there is, by the Abran mountains, again, this is a lot of fun when we have Google Maps, and I can actually show you these mountains, but just, think along. There's a mountain that's called Abran, right? And there are people there. So by the Abran mountains, there is a battalion that is hidden, and an army camp of 23,000 soldiers is set. Now, what the Spanish people did to take over the entire Moroccan area is they created 100 army enclaves and checkpoints, entire region. So imagine, you could not travel anywhere in Morocco unless any road you would travel, you would meet a Spanish checkpoint or a Spanish, barracks, or any of these things, you would find them there. So around these 60,000, they were all scattered, and there were 23,000 at a particular location, and there were around 40,000 that were scattered, but they had which was called Anwal. So at the Abran Mountains, they had around 23,000, and they had at Anwal, which is another city, coastal city, because it was right off. They could come from ships and get on. At that place, what happens is he attacks 300 soldiers. Imagine the entire Moroccan region being defended by only 300 people against the Spanish invasion. I won't call it colonialism, because colonialism means that they're trying to build that country into a colony and establish that. It was more of an invasion, right? That's a nicer way to put it. Oh, we were colonizing it. We were, acculturalizing it. We were advancing the states. No, they weren't. They had vicious agendas. So here's what happens is he goes with 300 and enters this massive 8,000. And within 6 hours, he takes control over the entire camp. And a lot of people, just because of the fear of these 300 people, many of them died. There's varying accounts of how many people were killed. But bottom line, around 1,000 people were killed. And in some accounts 200, some accounts 400, varying accounts. But most of them just ran. They could not take it. They were just so afraid. Psychologically, they were so afraid of these 300 people. Now, what happened was al-Karim al-Khattabi, Muhammad ibn al-Karim al-Khattabi, he was having this challenge, right? How do I convince my nation that we need to stand up against the invasion of Spain? How do I convince them? The only way to convince them is if I have a victory of such nature, which Allah provided him. So what happens is quickly his army goes from 300 to 3,000 people. And he says, we're not going to stop right here. Our next stop is their bigger camp. And everybody's like, are you crazy? Have you done the math? It's 40,000 people. According to the least estimates, it's 30,000 people. Let's take 30 if you want. These numbers are very varying, but they were huge. Like mathematically, it doesn't add up. You have Spain, they have cannons, they have airplanes, they have air force, they have artillery, they have guns, and he only has 3,000 people who are not even trained as soldiers. People who just have this inside of them that we need to defend our country. That's all they got. And belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that Allah is going to protect us. And that is the most powerful thing we take away from this story. Is that no matter what happens in our lives, we understand that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will always protect us. If we stand up for the right cause. So you have these 3,000 people, they go into this battle of Anwal. The General Fernandez, what he does is he gathers more troops. He sends messages. Everybody that is in different barracks and different checkpoints, all of you, we need to be at Anwal and the battle begins. And it's really fast. You don't realize it's, oh yeah, the battle happened, yeah, great. Okay, but what actually happened in the battle is even more fascinating. The battle begins and subhanallah, the entire battle, how many people do you think died? Give me a number. So 30,000, let's go with the number 30,000. 30,000 Spanish, 3,000 Muslims in Morocco. How many people do you think died? How many do you think of the Spanish people died? Out of how many? Out of 30,000? Pretty close. MashaAllah. Pretty close, actually. 22,000. That's pretty close. You're a good guesser, man. I can't ask you next time. You killed the fence in the one shot. So, mashallah, but that's good. That's really good. So, the total casualties, here's what happens, right? Total casualties, right? So, number of people that died were around 20,000. And there were 4,000 severely injured. They needed medical help. And there were around 570 that were turned into prisoners. Now, how many do you think were the shuhada, the martyrs, the Muslims? Muslims were 3,000. How many think they lost? No, let him think. Let's see if he can guess this. Muslims were 3,000. How many do you think from the 3,000 Muslims died? Okay. No. 15? No, it's in the hundreds. No. That's a good one. No. Raise, yeah? No. More. More.
258,
More.
300,
More. 500. Okay. So 500 Muslims were shaheed at that time. 600 were severely injured, and there were no prisoners. None of the Muslims were prisoners. Now, the 570 prisoners that were actually taken, they were taken back to the city of Ajdir. And oh yeah, by the way, I forgot to tell you the biggest part of that story. The biggest part of that story is that the person, Manuel Fernandez, it was such a bad defeat that many of his own army people, they actually saw him. Many of the people in the army, they actually saw him, and he killed himself in the battlefield. Take the fact that I was defeated by 3,000 villagers who had primitive guns. And this is something that took place, like literally, we're in 2021, this took place in 1921. Exactly 100 years ago from today. Okay, so this is so fast. Sometimes we think that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala only helps people that were like 4. But this is somebody right now, So finally the Spanish, they had no but to retreat. So they retreated back, and they ended up, it was a of Muslims, at the hands of Muslims. They could not take this. MashaAllah, then what ended up happening, long story short, his entire army grew. And it started growing and growing and growing. And basically what happened was there were around 30,000 Riffian fighters. So it became a very big army. So guess what the Spanish and the French did? They're like, you know what? We can beat them by numbers. So there was another battle that took place. This was with 30,000 Muslims against 100,000 soldiers. The Spanish, and the French army. And they sent all of these soldiers on ships upon ships upon ships. And they said, we cannot submit. And so what happens around 1924 is al-Karim, mashallah, he keeps increasing. And the people in France, they said, we need a strong presence. Spain and France, they get together, and each one of them commit 250,000 soldiers. This number, with the large number of aircrafts, artilleries, and they begin something which was called the Operation Reef Republic. In September 1925, the Spanish armies of Africa, so they had Spanish armies within Africa, they all also combined and supported with the Spanish and the French fleet, and they landed at the bay. And al-Karim, and they went straight dozens of miles away from the birthplace of al-Karim, al-Khattabi, Muhammad al-Karim al-Khattabi, Ajdir. They actually ended up over there, and they fought. And another battle took place. But what happens in this particular battle is that the Muslims do not give up. So the battle goes on for days on end, and the Muslims are continually winning. And finally the French, they're like, you know what? It's too much. It's too much effort. Let's get chemical bombs and just bomb the hell out of them. So they just brought chemical bombs. They have actually literal footage of these pilots that are sitting, and the soldiers at the back that are because they didn't have at that time. So what they would do is they would have a plastic container, and they would have pictures of these people holding these chemical bombs in the air with their bare hands when the plane is flying, and dropping it on the men that were there. At that point, al-Karim al-Khattabi, he decides and he says, I cannot risk the entire nation because this is no longer a game. They're throwing chemicals at Muslims. They're not differentiating between who's an army, who's an innocent civilian, and a lot of them were killed. al-Karim al-Khattabi, this intense battle lasted 10 months. 30,000 versus 500,000, and they could not win. 10 months of constant battle. Finally, al-Karim al-Khattabi on May 26th. Somebody's born on May 26th from our house, right? You are, yes. May 26th, 1926, al-Karim, he surrenders to the French. There's actually footage of him I was able to put out from some of the records on YouTube, and there's a footage of him being arrested and trying to bend him over in that footage to submit, and he's forcing, and he's like, no, I have surrendered, but I still have dignity in me. I'm not going to bend myself over. What do you think they did to him? I just want you guys to understand something. No, they didn't. The Muslim world revolt against him. No, they did not do any of that. Yes?
I have two guesses.
You have a two guess. Yes, go ahead.
So, my first guess is they killed him.
No, they didn't.
My second guess is that they tortured him.
They did not torture him. What were they afraid? So, that when he passed away, just so you know how afraid they were, when he passed away, his grave, Spanish people and the French people were afraid to even walk on the street where his graveyard is. They were so afraid of his grave. In his grave, they were so afraid of him. So, what do you think is the biggest leader of such caliber for a colonizing power? That if he settles in another Muslim land, the massacre, everybody's going to be right behind him. So what they did is they literally, do you guys have your Google Maps on? Got their Google Maps? You take out your phone and look up Island of Reunion. Actually, let me show it to you guys. No way. IG, so crazy. Yeah, it's from Madagascar. So you went to the island. Did you know that he was on that island for 20 years as a prisoner?
Yeah, it was still a French colony.
It still is. It still is a French colony. So he was kept on an island. I never thought that I would meet a person who's been to an island of Reunion. That is such a... That was the island where they sent his entire family, brother and everyone. And they said, you're not allowed to interact with any Muslim except your family. So there were members of his family that moved by a ship, and they were sent, Jazakallah khair, they were all sent to this island of Reunion, and what appeared from the face of this earth. Imagine if you didn't know back in the day, you in Google Earth, you don't know what Reunion is. You have no. I'm surprised, right? It's a beautiful place. It's colony, right? It's a French colony. Did you find there is actually a street named after him on that island? It is called Rue al-Karim.
Yeah, it was all in French.
So there's actually a name. They actually named a street after him in that island. So what ended up happening is there was a ship. An Australian ship by the name of that was actually visiting the island the way he traveled by ship. And they decided Morocco to get their independence from Spain and France. So that whatever uprising that hit took 20 years, they got their freedom. What they wanted to use political bait. They said, let's move him to France and let's put him on a ship. What ends up happening is around 1956, he is on this ship of Australian ship called ship is going to see through the Suez Canal into the, which sea? The Mediterranean. Or France from there. So it stops at the port of Aden. It stops at the port of Aden, and it refuels. Over there is a ship by the name of al-Ahdal, from a tribe of al-Ahdal. Here, who is a political prisoner, and he's a very influential person for Muslims, and he's on the ship. So al-Karim al-Khattabi, he's still on the ship that were more on the ship, that were translators slash, people who were going to be his accompany, they're taking him, his envoy, taking him to France. They were roaming in the streets and they met Ahdal, and he says, "Oh, you look like people, you're Arabs." He's like, "Yeah, oh, this is a French fleet. Yes, this is a French ship. And what are you guys doing?" He's like, taking al-Karim al-Khattabi to France. They were just so, and they didn't know who, any history of this person. They say, "Yeah, some prisoner, we're taking him." And he's like, "Okay." And actually, you can go look up the telegram copy. You can actually see the telegram that was sent by Al-Ahdal to King Farouk, saying that there is this ship of Katumba which is leaving the port of Aden in September in 1956. It is going to cross Suez Canal, and it is really up to the Egyptian people to say legend of ours. So King Farouk at that time, he commanded the commandos who, when the ship was parked and docked in the Suez Canal, they went on the ship, freed Abu Dhabi, and they brought him into Egypt, where he was given asylum, and he spent the remaining of his life, I think 16 or 17 years. He spent the rest of his life, 17 years of his life, in Egypt as a free person and somebody who was heavily influential. And then while he was in Morocco, he actually became the head of the Liberation Committee of the Arabs of Maghrib, or Arabs of Morocco. He became leader, and he liberated Morocco while he was still in Egypt. He was not allowed to be in Morocco. The French people asked him. And back then, when Muslims actually cared about other Muslims, the King Farouk actually defended, and he said nobody can take Muhammad Abdul Karim al-Khattabi. And then Muhammad Abdul Karim al-Khattabi had 6 children. No, he had 10 children. He had 6 sons and 4 daughters. Many of his daughters are still this day, and his grandkids are in Egypt. They've almost become Egyptians. They have Egyptian nationality. They live there. But again, this is somebody who, subhanAllah, who died no longer 1963, like after the independence of Pakistan. Many of that met him are still alive. And in this our history. But more important, if you remember the first lesson that I talked about yesterday, last lesson, we talked about why we should study history. And we said, we gave this sunnah, we gave this, actually I talked about it in the khutbah, I don't know if I talked about it in the lecture. We said that there are principles to learn about life. And one of the maxims or constants in this dunya that Allah wants to teach us is كم من فئة قليلة غلبت فئة كثيرة. How many times does it happen that there is a small group of people and they will have victory over a large group of people بإذن الله, by the idhn of Allah. The second thing we learn is he was able to have the political understanding and the importance of education. So he would not have been able to fight the Spanish if he had not studied in their lands, understood their culture, spoke their language, read their books, was part and parcel of understanding while keeping his identity alive. They respected him as a colonizing power and made him the qadi, the judge of his character. Number 3, what we learn from this story is no matter the odds against you, if you truly believe in your vision, Allah is going to test you. Allah is going to test you once, test you twice. But eventually, if you're steadfast on that, if you stick and hold on to it, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will provide. What happens? We'll go through challenges in our lives. What Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is looking for is like, are you consistent? Are you going to see, on the first, first sight of the challenge, you're like, main to ja raha hu, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. Or are you going to stick to it? For the younger kids over here, and this is for the younger ones over here, is it's very important for us to actually, in the early ages, spend time trying to understand read about these amazing people, because it should inspire. If they could do it, then I can do anything that I want. Never let anybody tell you this is not possible. If you do it during those difficult times where his entire country was invaded by an power that was coming in as an invader, only 300 people against 23,000 people, and he's like, he didn't say, oh, it's only 300. That can't happen, right? Or even the 3,000 versus 30,000. The odds of, right? But he believed in the cause and he moved on. Anybody else give a lesson over here? What do you learn from his story? We have 5 minutes before Salah. What do you... Yeah, not being apologetic. That's a really good one, right? Being to be a Muslim, keeping your head high, letting the world know that you didn't do anything wrong. As a matter of fact, you guys don't have a history that you can look up to. You can't come and tell me any morality, or you can't look down upon me. You have nothing against me. We as Muslims have a way better history than you, any given day, and it'll always be better. Yeah, go ahead. Never give up. MashaAllah. How old are you? 5. That's what she learned. Never. Maryam, what did you learn? Okay, so she learned she would want to get some more information about him and be write by biography about him. Yes, there's actually an on him, but sadly, the documentary is in Arabic. So if you can read the documentary, it's really interesting. You actually get to see the historical accounts from the Spanish side. People who, they have articles, they had newspapers that were written in France that have documented this entire, but also published as the man of the year, 1925 article of Times Magazine. If you look up Times Magazine, his picture actually shows up to you. So his picture actually shows up on magazine 1925. This used to be 15 cents. Man of the Year, number 7, al-Karim Khattabi, August 17th, 1925. His picture actually shows up on Time magazine as the person who the entire world at that time was inspired by. Right? So with that, we come to an end, inshallah. Our next story, next week, is going to be somebody from our subcontinent. And I think maybe Uncle would know him, Sir Hindi. 8:30. Do you know Ahmad Sir Hindi? Yes, Ahmad Sir Hindi. So we're going to do the story of Shaykh Ahmad Sir Hindi, because what he and again, I want to choose different stories. Not every story is going to be warfare. This is more how he used knowledge to change the society. And his society at that time was a very similar society of what we're living in. Very pluralistic, everything is good. All religions are good. We should love one another. The same thing we're going through. So it'll be very inspirational for us, inshallah, next week. Jazakallah khair. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.